And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, John Shulman. He's an internationally known expert and public speaker on negotiation and sales effectiveness, and has trained thousands of leaders and professionals worldwide. As president of Aligner, he helps organizations implement this training through learning games, tools, and methodologies. So with that, John, welcome, and I'll give you control.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nick. Really excited to be with you all today. We're going to have a lot of fun. And speaking of fun, I just give you a little more of my experience here, but I was thinking about an experience I had recently, which is one of our longstanding, excellent clients, really great relationship. I suddenly get an email out of the blue from somebody I have never heard of in purchasing, who says, well, Aligner, you're a valued partner. And as a valued partner, we want you to be aware that we are engaging on a major cost-cutting initiative, and we are happy to invite you to contribute to our cost-cutting initiative. Saying, what? Where is this coming from? And of course, the recommended contribution is a 15% across the board decrease in all our pricing. Wow. So anyways, that's the kind of experience we're going to talk about today. When you hear out of the blue often from somebody sometimes you've never even heard of that you're being asked to contribute or help, or if they're being more aggressive about it, they are accusing you of overcharging them, and now they're going to right-size the whole situation. So first question I have for everybody is, over the next 6 months, do you expect any of your B2B customers to challenge your pricing? Please type in the questions, or as Nick said, the chat, yes or no. Do you think this is going to happen? Very, very curious to see what kind of pressure you all may be getting or not, if you're not expecting this kind of challenge. So please go ahead, type in the questions panel or the chat, and Nick will let us know how we score on this, how many of us are looking at likely that kind of situation. All right.
So John, I know you want a representative sample, but I've yet to see a no and a whole lot of yeses.
Well, I hate to say it, but I'm not really surprised. Are you seeing my Nick? Are you seeing my
panel?
Just curious.
No,
yeah,
I'm not.
The web. Okay, I'm getting. For some reason, I went whole screen here, and I can't get back to my. Can't get back to the PowerPoint.
I'm seeing your PowerPoint up. So.
Oh, you're seeing it up. I'm unable to get it.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm completely unable to see the PowerPoint.
What do you have on the screen? To go to webinar panel?
My video.
Oh, just drag it to the corner, and then grab it at the top.
Okay, gotcha. There you go. All right, beautiful. Yep. All right, so thanks for the guidance on that. All right, so what are we talking about here? We're talking about really, really challenging situations, like, we may need to raise prices, and we find our customers are trying to push for lower prices. Also, in my example, I get this email out of the blue, and they're saying, you have to respond. They expect a reaction or a response. And especially when we have, strong relationships with accounts, and they're telling us we've got to lower our prices or our prices are too high. If we say nothing, what happens? How does that impact the relationship? How does it impact what happens going forward? And then obviously, when our customers are focused only on price, they really don't see our full value proposition. So we need to keep that front and center with them. And finally, we've got to be consistent and strategic when we deal with price-focused customers. So that's kind of what we're looking at when we get these challenges. What we're going to cover today is we're going to do a quick overview on some of the common tactics that B2B customers typically use, just to tell you, I've been on the other side of it significantly, worked with some of the largest supply chain and purchasing organizations. And so I have some insights into how they look at this stuff and how they put pressure on us. So we'll look at some of those tactics. Then I'm going to focus on 5 factors that we can use to really help us manage these price discussions. They're going to be things that you normally do think about. We're just going to structure it in a framework that I think is going to make a lot of sense to you. We're going to look at using a consistent and strategic approach to handling these situations and price management, specifically with price-focused customers. And at the end, we're going to look at some common mistakes that we want to avoid. We will have some fun. We're going to play a game as well as we try out these different things. And we'll make sure we have time in the last 10, 15 minutes for your questions, and looking forward to that. So if you type in any questions, we'll get to them at the end for sure. All right. You know, how do we get this price pressure? You know, we hear things like, yeah, you took a, whatever percent price increase, say, coming out of the pandemic, but we've seen a, whatever percent drop in commodities. So they're essentially saying when we saw prices increasing and all the commodities were going up, we took advantage of it and increased our prices. Now that certain things are dropping, they expect to see us drop our prices. Or, they basically say that our pricing is, out of step with their other options, that they've got other options. They're looking at cost drivers. They expect our pricing to reflect certain cost drivers that they are measuring and keeping track of. Obviously, one of the big things we hear is, hey, if you don't reduce your prices, we're looking at other options. Maybe we're going to switch to other suppliers. You get those kind of threats. And then another one that sounds kind of simple and easy and is a very seductive kind of approach is, well, I need to justify internally with my business partners your pricing. And so the idea is share some data that I can share internally to justify your pricing. In particular, they're often looking for cost data. And, what are these things really about? Basically, they're often very unreasonable demands. They don't even expect you to agree. In the example I gave at the beginning, it was just a trick. They just send this same form email out to literally all their tens of thousands of suppliers, very large organization, and see if anybody will bite, if anybody will blink and cave in. Then, when they make these explicit or implied threats, like they're looking at other options, they've got other choices, that kind of thing. Time pressure is very, very common, where they give you a deadline. They say by such and such a date, they expect a response. The cost data I mentioned, very often they will share misleading information too, to try to get you to panic or cave in. And sometimes you'll hear from people such as purchasing, where they really try to get in the way of your other relationships with champions that you have in the account. And they say, you got to deal with me, purchasing. So these are some of the things that you're often going to find. Type into the chat or in the questions panel, what are some of the pressure tactics you have experienced? What are some of the things you have heard? I'm just very curious to see if they're aligned with some of the things I just mentioned, or you've been experiencing some different ones. So please go ahead and type in there. Nick, you'll keep an eye on that. Let me know as we go, after people have a chance to type in a little bit, what are the things that they're experiencing? And we'll be sure if there's some new ones or interesting ones there that we can address those specifically.
Yeah, and I'll rattle these off as I see them flying in. But threats, a couple people. I'm going to try to group these. I'm seeing, I'm seeing the procurement, the scary procurement email, the across the board cost cutting. I'm seeing complaints about I'm seeing complaints about pandemic price increases. I think you alluded to that. You shouldn't charge for this. It should be included. So I'm thinking some bundling kind of effects there. This is a big one. I'm seeing a couple of people say about the competition. Competitors, you actually have very aggressive prices. Your competition, the competition is offering X% less. Quality complaints, that one just flew in. I think that's a great one as well. Service issues. You need to cut spending, and we want you to cut your costs by X million. So that direct to reach out. So I think you're generally getting a flavor. I'm seeing a couple more.
No, it makes sense. Yeah, I do like the characterization of the procurement email as the scary procurement email. That's a good one, because they generally do have some implicit threats in there. So all of these make perfect sense. These are kind of things we've been hearing about from everyone and dealing with across the board. So how do we deal with this kind of stuff? And we've been doing a lot of benchmarking around this, a lot of research, and what we're seeing is there are really three kinds of approaches that people are often using as they think about how to respond. The first one, which is the vast majority of people, is just act and react. So you hear something and you react to it. I get a scary email, or I get pressure on, quality, or they say we shouldn't be charging for certain things, or our competition is doing something different. And my initial response, about 80% of the time, what we see is people just react to it. Well, they justify or explain, that kind of thing. And then there is another type of response, which is to be competitive. And that is to say, okay, you think you're going to get ahead of me? Well, I'm going to block you. I'm going to stop you. I'm going to throw stuff back at you. I'm going to, go to people and complain. I'm going to work with my champions. I'm going to ignore. I'm basically saying, okay, you're pushing this way, and I'm going to try to stay ahead of you. And I'm going to, I'm not going to let you get the advantage here. And that's like about 15% of the time. Where we want to be, and we need to be when we get this kind of price pressure, especially from key accounts, is strategic. And by that, I mean, we have to be thinking through, for what purpose or why? Why should I respond? Why should I not respond? How should I respond? What will the impact be? We want to be thinking all these things through, because when we have key relationships at stake, when we have a lot of business at stake, we don't want to make mistakes. We don't want to make a mistake of reacting prematurely or being too aggressive and competitive when it's not warranted. We want to think it through carefully and be strategic. And as you can see, in fewer than 5% of the cases, this is what people do. So this is really what we want to be, where we want to be. This is the approach I'm going to share with you. So how are we going to be strategic to handle customer price pressure? What are we going to do? All right, we're going to look basically at 5 factors. And these are 5 factors that you can always apply. The first one is leverage. What do we mean by leverage? The question is, what is the account going to do? When they threaten us or they say our prices are too high, are they going to walk away? Can they walk away? Are they going to de-emphasize us, buy less? What are the things they might be able to do? In other words, how strong is their position? How much ability do they have to walk away from us in various ways if they're not happy with us? And flipping it around, how much leverage do we have to really essentially keep them with us or not have to cave in? Do they need us? Is our brand really strong? Are they locked in on a contract? Is our quality so much superior to competition that they'd be, taking very, very bad risks by moving away from us? We need to evaluate leverage, each side's ability essentially to walk away from the other. Now, once we think about leverage, we also have to think about relationships. Why? Well, when we're dealing with key accounts, we may have a range of relationships with the account, right? We have our champions, we have people maybe in operations or other roles, senior leadership, who love what we do, who really value our partnership and our the value we bring. And then there may be other folks, could be quite often procurement, finance, others who are looking at it and saying, gee, we've got to get some cost reductions out of this relationship. And that's a different kind of relationship. We may have a relationship with them. We may not have much of a relationship with them. We need to think this stuff through, because anything we do that is in response to customer price pressure is likely to impact our relationships. The next piece we've got to look at is value. And by value, we're talking about really 2 things, very, very specific. And this is important. We're going to go into this in more detail together to really understand this. One aspect of value is what we like to call differentiated value. By that, we mean value that we deliver that the account cannot get from any other alternative. So they're not getting it from our competition. They're not getting it if they just move away from us and don't buy. We're delivering value that they're not going to get any other way. That's differentiated value. So that's looking out to competition. but it's also looking internally at the account and saying, who are the stakeholders whose interests we satisfy? Because that is where they measure value. And we're going to talk about that together a little bit. So that's differentiated value we deliver, which is better than competition and really satisfies the interests of the stakeholders we're dealing with. The second aspect of value is, yes, I'm being pressured. It's maybe aggressive. It may be a scary email. It could be, really unpleasant in certain ways. But does it open the door potentially to new opportunities to create more value? And this is something I have been working with many, many organizations where there may be something that in the past we always wanted to move forward on, but the account was not really ready, or they were just putting us off. And then as a result, actually, of price pressure, we were able to open the door to a broader conversation about other opportunities that created additional value for us in addition to the account. So again, using value not only in terms of the differentiated value that we deliver, but also new opportunities to create value for ourselves and for the account. The fourth factor is risk. And risk, in a sense, rolls up these other three factors. If you think about it that way, obviously with leverage, there is clearly risk. There can be risk to us if the account is in fact moving away from us or threatening and could move because they have other alternatives that they could use. That's clear risk to us. But there's also potentially risk to the account. Risk, for example, if they did make a bad decision, maybe they wouldn't achieve, say they think they're going to get cost savings, they wouldn't achieve them, or they'd run into quality or efficiency or other challenges that they haven't really accounted for. So risk is really important in terms of leverage. It's important in terms of relationships, because I don't want to do things that are unnecessarily going to cause relationship problems. And obviously, there's the risk of lost value, both for the account and for us if this doesn't go well. So we got to think about risk. And finally, there's communication. And by communication, what I mean is it's all great and necessary to understand the first four factors and do a good analysis and be very clear. But how we communicate, with whom we communicate, and even whether we communicate is absolutely critical. And I'm talking here not only about external communication with the account, but also internal communication with my stakeholders internally, whether it's my supervisor, it's finance, or others who have a very strong view about what we should do. Often, I need to communicate very, very clearly a strategy that's going to essentially enable us to minimize or manage risk and achieve our business objectives, given the price pressure that we're getting. So these are the five factors. What we're going to do is look very closely at number 3 and number 5, that is value and communication. That's what we're going to work on together. And so let me turn now to value. When we're thinking about value, what we're really talking about is, again, the differentiated value that we deliver. And it could come from a whole variety of things. It could have to do with quality, brand, services, efficiency, cost savings, all different kinds of things that we may have. Safety, you name it, depending on the industry. But you're offering what are the things that we deliver better than competition and that really satisfy the interests of the stakeholders in our account. So, and the second part is the new growth opportunities that I was mentioning previously. So when we think about value, it's always these two aspects. One, the total value we deliver, and we should be able to calculate it in various ways and communicate it. And we're going to actually show you some thoughts on how you can do that. And then secondly, are there new growth opportunities? And if so, how might we share value with the account so we can achieve more value, but also potentially share some of that new value with the account? And finally, when we do this analysis, we have got to be as specific as possible, as transparent as possible with data that demonstrates to the customers the value we deliver, both have delivered and can deliver going forward, and ideally do it in a way that the customer can review, can test, can challenge. Why? Because rather than just respond or react to price pressure, what we're doing then in that conversation about whether the customer, the account, actually agrees with our assumptions and how we're calculating the value that we're delivering, that's a totally different kind of conversation. It's a data-driven conversation about value we are delivering and the customer is ultimately recognizing through that conversation. That's a conversation we really, really want to have, especially when we're getting pressured on price. So let's explore that a little bit. Let's actually play a game. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to put on for us an introduction to a game, a little bit of background, and then I'm actually going to turn it over after we listen to this to Brian, and he is going to help us understand essentially how we could put together a really compelling presentation around value that's being asked for. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over and play this introduction to the game. So pay attention to the game.
You're an account manager with responsibility for relationships at BigCo, one of your organization's largest accounts. BigCo's new procurement specialist, Linda, has claimed your costs are too high and demanded a price reduction on 5 of your products. Your organization has decided as of now it will not agree to any price reductions. Your primary contact, Fred, BigCo's Director of Operations, is engaged in discussions with Linda about what to do given your organization's refusal to reduce prices. Fred has asked you to provide detailed information about the value your products have delivered to BigCo over the past year. Your finance department prepared a spreadsheet for BigCo showing $100,000 of cost savings BigCo achieved by using your products rather than competitive alternatives. In addition, your organization has identified a new opportunity that could generate $50,000 of incremental profit for your organization. If BigCo agrees to the new opportunity and accepts all your current pricing for the remainder of the year, your supervisor has authorized you to provide a $25,000 rebate to BigCo. You're meeting with Fred to discuss the value your products have delivered and see if BigCo will agree to the new business opportunity.
All right, so we have an opportunity here. We're going to see if Brian can help us put together the numbers we need to justify the value we've delivered, and we hope use that information to get procurement to back off by strengthening our champion on their internal conversations. So, Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Help us out here. We need to convince BigCo how we can show more value and the value we've delivered.
Great, thanks, John. Thanks for letting us participate in your game. So, as John said, we put together a value story to kind of coincide with the game and the story that we're sort of in the middle of right now. So, we added a few details to the story to kind of play well with our value story here that I'm going to show you. So this is a typical leverage point value story. We're showing it in a browser. This is typically prepared before the meeting so that the salesperson has all of the items in the story that they're prepared to show the customer. So this was customized a little bit for this particular meeting. And of course, it's Big Corp. And we'll be talking about a system called AirVentus, which is a high-end air conditioning system. So there's several parts of that offering. We'll talk about those different parts as we move forward. A typical value story is broken into chapters. So chapter 1 is usually just reminding the customer, here's what we do, here's what the offering is. Sometimes they're hearing this for the first time, maybe. Sometimes, in this case, they're being reminded. You know, they've been a customer for a year, and we're reminding them what we do. And specifically, and John highlighted this earlier, we want to focus on the differentiated value. So we're going to remind them why we're better and different than the offer that they had a year ago from a competitor and what they got from us that they wouldn't have received from the competitor. It's important to remind, especially procurement, that if they'd gone another direction, they wouldn't be seeing this value that they're seeing today. Also, usually in the early chapter, we have an assumption screen. You can think of this as their operations details, Or very simply, these are the assumptions that are going into our value model, which is embedded inside of here. So by showing this to the customer, we're able to essentially get their agreement that we have the details correct, but also make them part of the process. If they disagree with something, we can certainly change the numbers live and get them back on track with, agreeing or participating in our story. But we want them to be part of the process rather than having it just be a one-way sort of presentation. So these are all editable, and these questions are created specifically for this particular story. What we're going to do is focus initially on the first two items of our offering, which is the fact that we reduce the energy costs for our customers against the competition, again, that differentiated value, and we reduce the downtime in terms of taking care of the system itself. And that's a reduction, again, versus the main competitor. We're going to talk about this reduced maintenance cost in a moment. But our goal here initially is, of course, to remind them of the value that they're receiving. So on an annual basis, we've calculated, and of course, annual meaning over the past year, we've calculated over $100,000 in value based on those two value drivers and based on some of the assumptions that we've made here already. So as we get into the next chapter, we're then highlighting each particular area. So why do we reduce their energy costs? We have better software in our system. It's leading in the industry. No one else has this. It allows the system to work more efficiently, et cetera, et cetera. And when we calculate across 12 months, that equals almost $65,000. And then the same thing for the reduction in downtime. So what we're doing here is we're helping the customer understand how we calculated this, inviting their feedback. We can show them the math. We can say, pretty simple math. If they disagree, we want to hear about it. We also want to hear about our assumptions. We learn a lot from customers by confirming assumptions with them and having them maybe tell us either we're correct or we're incorrect, but also giving us the background on those assumptions. That's how we learn a lot of the good, useful details about a customer's operations that help us to do other things like we're going to do here in a moment. So after going through each of those, we have a very simple waterfall chart, which highlights the two areas in green, which are the two areas of value, and gives us a total. But we're not done here. We're going to use this opportunity, and hopefully, the meeting's going well. We're having a good conversation. We want to use this opportunity to insert some additional conversation about a new offering that we had last year, but they decided not to go with, and that's our maintenance. So we have an ability to turn on this kind of 24/7 maintenance where we're taking care of the system for them, really, and we're removing a lot of their need to invest in, taking care of themselves. So there's a cost to it. But we're willing to split the value with them. So we're going to turn this on in our value story here and let them see that we value this at about $50,000 per year. And again, we can show them why we think it's worth $50,000 and where that comes from. So they can see how we calculated that. Again, they can push back on the assumptions if they want to. But now that we've added that to the mix, now we have a slightly different waterfall chart that's added the maintenance. And we would put a value on it, but we split the value of this new service is $50,000. We would split that and take 25 of it and give 25 back to the customer. So sort of a two-step process here that we see. We typically sort of leave it here and have that discussion with the customer. We're able to do a few different things. We can, at this point, we can download a PowerPoint or a PDF. And I did a PDF here as we were listening to John a moment ago. So, the PDF is basically a copy of our conversation. If we've made changes to the data, that's captured here, and we can send that to them. But the other thing we can do is send them a link. So I can click on this share link option here. And just by putting in their email address, it will send this directly to procurement. They can play around with it if they want. We can have certain parts locked down, certain parts open, but they can send it to their colleagues. And as a salesperson, you see this access log. I can see everyone who's logged in. I can see how long. And then based on the value story itself, I can see what changes they may have made as they're kind of experimenting with different things. So that's it. It's a quick one, but hopefully we we moved the story ahead a few feet.
Oh, that's absolutely awesome, Brian. That's what I was hoping for. I think we have what we need now to initiate our conversation with Fred. And what we're talking about here is we're talking about that situation again, just to remind ourselves where we're dealing with Linda in procurement, who is very aggressively asking us to reduce our pricing, saying it's too high. My primary contact and champion, Fred, Director of Operations, is trying to get Linda to back down and accept that we deliver sufficient value and we don't need to reduce our prices because we're not prepared to reduce them. We're not going to. And we now have, thanks to Brian's work, a spreadsheet and, in fact, an ability to really have that dialogue with Fred, in the first case, our champion, to see if we can move this thing forward. So let's see how we do. Let's give it a try. Let's go meet Fred and see what happens. Here we go.
I don't know which way we're going to go. I'm under a lot of pressure from procurement to justify staying with your products.
John, I think we're missing your audio. You got to toggle back.
You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we have three choices. We are going to go through the three choices with audio, and then I'm going to ask you to vote for choice 1, choice 2, or choice 3, and we'll see what happens. So here we go. I'm going to play all three choices, and then we'll do a vote.
We've calculated the value our products delivered for you over the past 12 months. That value includes $100,000 in cost savings you've achieved using our products that you wouldn't have obtained otherwise. I have a spreadsheet you can share with your colleagues detailing the cost savings. Our analysis shows we've delivered $100,000 of value to BigCo over the last 12 months. Has your procurement team identified specific concerns about our products we could help you address? Our analysis shows our products have delivered $100,000 in cost savings for BigCo. In addition, we see a new opportunity that can generate another $25,000 of value for BigCo.
All right. We have three very reasonable, and I would argue attractive options. The first one, we're telling them about the value we've delivered and proposing to share a spreadsheet documenting that value. The second one, we are again saying we've delivered that value and asking for our champions' insights into really what's driving procurement's concerns. And the third one, we're saying we've delivered that value, that $100,000 of value, and we do see a new opportunity to generate another $25,000. So vote now in the chat or questions for choice 1, choice 2, or choice 3. And we will we'll take a look at what happens here.
All right. Oh, we got an interesting mix. This is exciting. So far, I'm watching these come in. I'm just going to get a few more before I give the initial polling. So I think I think about half the folks responding are choosing choice 3. I'm seeing an even mix of the remaining half being 1 or 2. So I'd say the vote is for 3, but it's not unanimous.
All right, let's do fair enough. Let's try 3. Let's see what happens. Here we go. All right.
Our analysis shows our products have delivered $100,000. Our analysis shows our products have delivered $100,000 in cost savings for BigCo. In addition, we see a new opportunity that can generate another $25,000 of value for BigCo.
Wow, that's a lot to process. Hold on a minute.
Fred says you want to do more business with us. I can tell you right now, unless you reduce your prices, we're not considering any new business with you.
Sorry, I can't help you. Procurement's calling the shots right now.
Oh no, that was not good. Oh, bummer. All right, yeah, that was not what we hoped for. Shoot. So what it's really saying here is that we didn't, I think we didn't really support sufficiently the savings for this customer. And that's really what Fred was asking me for. He really needed us to substantiate those cost savings. And by going at this moment into the new opportunity as well, we may have overplayed our hand, unfortunately. He wasn't ready for it. And once you get procurement back in without supporting our claim cost savings, it didn't go well. All right, I'll tell you what, let's do this again. Let's try a different one and see where we are. We'll try another one.
I don't know which way we're going to go. I'm under a lot of pressure from procurement to justify staying with your products.
We've calculated the value our products delivered for you over the past 12 months. That value includes $100,000 in cost savings you've achieved using our products that you wouldn't have obtained otherwise. I have a spreadsheet you can share with your colleagues detailing the cost savings.
I appreciate you sharing this information. I'll pass it along. Is there anything else I need to know?
All right. We at least have progressed here. We're getting somewhere. So he's going to pass that along. And now basically he's opening the door to that next conversation about differentiated value that we can deliver going forward with a new opportunity. So he's opening the door to that new opportunity. And what we're talking about here is essentially meeting the specific stakeholder we're dealing with where he or she is. So in this case, Fred is asking specifically for documentation that he needs to fight the internal battle on our behalf. We need to feed him that information that he needs first. Once he's secure that we've given him what he needs, then we can open the door to that next conversation. So we're going to stop this one here. We're actually going to go back to the PowerPoint. If you want to continue this game and finish it up, reach out to me. We'll be happy to get you set up. But we want to continue now and talk about how we communicate, what we communicate, because this is really a key piece of how we deal with this price pressure. So remember, this is the fifth factor in our 5 factors. So the first factor, again, was leverage, or the power to walk away. The second factor was relationships, all the different relationships we have externally with this account, and then internally, our relationships internally with our own colleagues. Third is value, which we were just working on. Fourth is risk. We're skipping over that one right now, and we're going to communication. So the number one thing on communication is, no matter what you decide to do externally, it's absolutely essential that you have a conversation internally with your stakeholders about your recommended strategy. You want that buy-in and support. You need to talk to them about, look, it may be that we're going to ignore sort of one of those scary emails from some procurement person we don't even know, and we're just going to wait and see if anything comes of it. But I need to communicate that internally so people are aware of it, they're on board, they understand why we're doing what we're doing. Then when we're looking at the external communication, what we really have to look at is, why? To be strategic, why are we going to communicate? Is there a good reason to communicate? If so, how are we going to communicate? Is it a meeting? Is it an email, a text? What's it going to be? A phone call? What are we going to communicate? And even when are we going to communicate to external stakeholders? So we need to think through all those different pieces of it. Now, critical piece, if it's data that they're asking for, they very often will ask us, well, show us your cost data, show us to justify your pricing. You do not have to share that data. You do not have to share that data. We often feel pressure or think we do need to share it. You don't have to. What you do need to do is share only data that supports your business objectives. So if you have cost information that you feel is relevant and should be shared because it really strengthens and supports your argument that your pricing is appropriate, maybe you share that. But you only share data that is going to support your ability to achieve your business objectives. Now, that's not always easy, and sometimes it means saying things or avoiding saying certain things, which is why it's critical, if you're going to be strategic about your communication, that you prepare talking points in advance, especially if you're going to have to say some things that may get a tough response from the account, and you want your internal business partners, your internal stakeholders to support you. They should be aware of, hey, this is what we're planning to share. This is how we're going to say it. That way, in case your contacts or other people at the account go around you to others in your organization, everybody's on the same page. So if possible, you want to make sure that you have talking points, that the talking points align. What you communicate aligns with your strategy. Absolutely essential. Let me give you an example. So these are some real life types of examples that we've seen be very, very effective when people are getting, real pushback on costs. One of them is, hey, when costs rose during the pandemic, we did not take the full cost increases into our price increases. So we did not take it all. We basically protected you from some of that. Also, even though the increase in inflation may have reduced, prices are still rising overall. They're not actually falling. They're just not as rising as fast. And we're still catching up with some of the previous cost increases that we're dealing with. Another one is that, customers have seen other cost increases and their own prices have increased after the pandemic. So they may be pressuring us, but if you look at what they're doing with their, with their customers and their pricing, they're not doing the same thing that they're saying we have to do for them. Another one that's very important, especially if they're pressuring you for data on costs, is, our costs, many of them are unique and they enable us to deliver the value for you that you count on, and these generic cost indices that you're relying on don't reflect that. Now, you may share some of that, you may not, depends on what makes sense in terms of meeting your objectives. And then another one that's very, very effective is, look, we continue to make investments in a very high cost environment to deliver the value. Again, remember, value is part of what we've been communicating with them about, that they really need and count on. So very often you're going to see with procurement people, for example, take for granted or try to take for granted all the value we deliver, but then come back and say, well, our pricing's out of whack. So again, these are ways to help reframe the conversation around why the value they're counting on and need is basically justifies our pricing. So these are some of the kind of high level talking points. I want to switch gears briefly and then we'll open it up for questions, which is, what are some of the common mistakes that we see people fall into? These are really traps. One of them is, we call it the data trap. I've talked about that a little bit. Don't share data that, really can undermine where you're trying to go with your pricing. So if you have data that supports your pricing and you feel it's appropriate to share it, that's one thing. But just because somebody asks or pressures you, you do not have an obligation in particular to share data that does not support your pricing. Another piece is just not being adequately prepared, being caught by surprise. And in those situations, if at all possible, have high level talking points ready to go. If you need a little bit, if it's a surprise, you're getting one of these out of the blue pressure point emails or something, take the time. Do not react quickly. Do not rush your response. Get your internal people aligned, get your high level talking points ready to go, be confident about that, and then be consistent going back. Because one of the things the procurement organizations are trained to do is look for any inconsistencies, whether it's data that you share that doesn't support your pricing, or you say things that are not strategic and all of a sudden they go after you on that. overlooking value, not really being clear about that. So we've got to focus again here on differentiated value that we deliver. So this is to be very specific value that we are delivering that they're not going to get, the account's not going to get anywhere else. That's the key, and that it satisfies the identified interests of specific stakeholders in their organization. So we need to be really precise about that. Another mistake is, when we don't look carefully enough at the risks and the benefits potentially going forward, what happens is we may either make mistakes around risk and get ourselves into difficult positions where suddenly it turns out maybe they are going in a different direction and we could have known more about it. Or there are growth opportunities that we've tried in the past or that we know about, but we fail to bring them up because we think this is a defensive situation we're in rather than an opportunity to look at those new growth opportunities. And that goes to the next one as well. If those growth opportunities are there, negotiate for them. Just because we're getting pressure in one direction doesn't mean we can't open the door to those other pieces. I've been involved in situations where it looked pretty grim and dire. It was like, oh my goodness, we're being pushed to do this stuff we really don't want to do. But then by turning it into an opportunity that we had been looking for quite a while, we actually found that the overall package we negotiated in that situation was a multi-million-dollar benefit when it looked like we were going to have to do a give back. So it was really, really important. And then finally, one thing that we look at is in communicating the possibility of sharing cautionary tales, which is to say when we help the customer understand that, look, if you do go in this direction, if you do de-emphasize us or go away from us or pressure us because you feel that our pricing is too high, we need to reduce it, and you make mistakes, this is kind of what could happen. And that can be actually one of the most powerful ways to influence the decision making of others. So that's something we haven't talked about today really, but that's a part of our 5 factors that's really, really important to think through and be confident about, is sharing cautionary tales. So in total, we're going to open up for questions in a moment. What are we looking at? Look, customer pricing pressure is going to come in a lot of different forms. Don't be surprised, be prepared for it. We are seeing that it's, especially post-pandemic, it's a real focus by a lot of purchasing organizations to claw back or get back what they feel they gave previously. Again, the 5 factors: leverage, relationships, value, both delivered and the growth opportunities, risk, and that relates to risk perception and risk tolerance, and then communication. These are the things that we need to be thinking about, the 5 factors, and be prepared with our high-level talking points that justify our pricing, show the differentiated value, and get the conversation into a better place. So that's what I have. Here's our contact information. I will say, please reach out if you're interested in more information. Happy to go deeper with you on the 5 factors. Look at how we can, learn and grow together. We've got a lot of stuff. We do, if you like the simulations, we do have simulations on all the factors. They're really fun. We pair them with data analytics that are really exciting and cool in what they show you, both at the individual level and organizationally. And we use that data also to provide instant data-driven coaching within the context of the game. So it's pretty cool stuff. So I look forward to your questions. Please reach out. If you want to reach out afterward, reach out directly. Love to hear from you. And I will turn it back now to Nick to tell me what kind of questions we're getting and what people would like to get into.
Sounds great. Thank you, John, for a great presentation. I picked up a lot, and I hope the audience did well. And I think what John and Brian both showed are ways that technology can enable B2B companies to help their sales teams convey value and negotiate with backbone. So if you're interested in learning more about either solution, you can also, in addition to the means John mentioned, let us know in the exit survey. If so, we'll get it right back to John. He can reach out directly, or we can reach out directly if you're interested in learning more about leverage point value stories. So we've got time for a few questions. Got a couple coming in on the chat. So now is a great time to enter them if you'd like to participate in the Q&A. The first question I've got is, this one's kind of interesting. I'll go in a number of directions, but do customers that truly understand your solution's value tend to push back on price less?
So I would say the answer generically is yes, but there's a huge caveat, and that is it depends on the stakeholders you're dealing with and it often changes at various times. So a lot of what we see with our large clients is they have huge accounts, they have a variety of relationships, and some of the stakeholders they deal with, whether it's operations or others that they are very close to, really see the value prop and see the value delivered and do not want to change and are comfortable and are not pushing as hard on the pricing. At the same time, what I have seen, especially with large enterprises, and I've worked on that side of it as well, on the purchasing supply chain side, is they do go through these cycles where they may have a new chief procurement officer, they may have just a new person on the account, and what they are doing is they are pushing an initiative to drive cost savings across the organization, and they're going to go after you even though many of the people in their organization believe in you, they see the value prop, they really do not want to change, they're still going to go after you. So again, it really depends on where the pendulum is in these organizations, who's calling the shots. And you have to understand that, and you have to dig deep and try to get information that you can about where this is coming from. One thing I will say is, if you're hearing from, some person in procurement you've never heard from before, you don't know who they are, look them up on LinkedIn, ask people about them, try to find out, is this person, do they legitimately have the power to really influence various stakeholders on their side, or is this more of a generic, just kind of attempt to squeeze all suppliers? It really matters to dig in and get that kind of information, because ultimately what you're going to need to do is work through the people with whom you do have relationships so that they can tell your value story internally, which is, again, what that game was starting to explore. You've got to empower them to tell your story, and that means they need the data that you can share with them to really tell the story effectively, because there are a variety of different stakeholders internally at the account side who are going to be pushing in different directions. And by the way, on their side, on the account side, they're battling often internally over who gets credit for cost savings, for total cost of ownership, et cetera. They literally negotiate that stuff internally on the account side. Great question.
No, couldn't agree with you more. The internal enabling your supporters to communicate that value internally is absolutely critical. And we got another question that came in, I think, during the simulation that's a little related to that. So basically, which company other than BigCo would actually disclose their added value of 100K achieved by using your product versus the competitor product? And if they do that, are they saying you sell it too cheap? Or so I guess.
No, it's a great question. So to be very clear, and I think Brian was really helpful in terms of his demo on this, we are making assumptions about what we believe the cost savings are for them. Now, they are our assumptions. Now, obviously, in the course of working with them over the past year, we've learned about their operation. In delivering our solution, we're learning a lot. But it is true that they are our assumptions about the value we're delivering. So this is not actually information that's provided by BigCo, and we expect that we're going to end up in a data-driven conversation, which is, I believe, what Brian was really getting into there, that we're going to share our assumptions and they're going to push back. The key, though, is that's a good conversation for us to have. It's a lot better than what are our costs are out of whack and our pricing's out of whack. Instead of that, what we're saying is, let's talk about the value we've delivered. We're making assumptions based on our understanding of your operation and the industry and our understanding of how we deliver more effectively than our competition. Now, they 100% we expect pushback, but that pushback, again, is a data-driven conversation about the value we've delivered and whether, in fact, that value, is it 100,000? Maybe they come back and say, it's 80. Well, we're still ahead of the game, right? So no, it's a great question. We are not expecting BigCo to give us their data. We are not expecting BigCo to give us straight answers either. And they probably don't really want to have that conversation with us if they're trying to get us focused on cost reductions and telling us our costs are out of line. But we are re-pivoting the conversation to the value, the differentiated value we delivered. And again, remember, we're trying to do it through our champions who already believe in our solution so they can have the conversation internally. And quite honestly, we may never hear the exact truth of what they talked about internally. It may get skewed and fed back to us in a way that's not exactly accurate, that suits them. But we know when the temperature goes down and they stop pushing as hard to get us to reduce prices, that we're being effective. But that's the conversation that we want to facilitate internally for our champions on the account side. So no, it's a great question. We do not expect them to give us that data. We are making assumptions, sharing it, and expecting pushback and dialogue about whether our assumptions are accurate.
Yeah, we could not agree with that more. We talk with many of our customers, and many of our customers tell us all the time that it's not just the communication of value, but the process by which you collaboratively build that business case together, using your assumptions and their data, but providing the initial framework, provides that spark that repositions the conversation in a way that you just mentioned. So could not agree with you more.
Absolutely.
So another one that just came in, I think is another great one is, so we have a situation where the competitor is actually as good and presents the same value proposition, but in such situations, in their experience, that they found price to be the deal breaker. So what are your thoughts on how they might want to position themselves there?
Yeah. So, okay. So there are a couple things there. Number one, that requires some really challenging internal conversations about whether our competitive position, right? And whether our pricing is sustainable. And I would want to surface that and get that raised internally at high levels, because again, we want to see across a number of different accounts. It may be that we're much stronger in certain niches than others, or there may be certain aspects of value that we are actually better at than competition. So I want to go deeper on that second point. So one of the things, and this is not in any way to suggest that we don't want to calculate value in the ways that Brian was sharing and Leverage Point does really well. We do need to try to do that where possible, because those numbers are always going to be relevant in various conversations. But there's more to value than just what can be calculated. And what I mean by that is that the account stakeholders, the different people in the account, they actually have different ways of measuring value. Some of it is quantified in spreadsheets and some of it is not. Let me give you an example. Risk. How, if your operations, do you quantify the risk of switching to another solution that might be just as good, but there's going to be some transition? You could call it cost, but there's also a little bit of risk in how we're going to change some things. They're going into a place that's unknown. Most people, if given the opportunity in that situation, would prefer to avoid that risk. So there's a lot of different aspects of value that may not be easy to quantify that we still need to be aware of, capture, and communicate as differentiated value to the right stakeholders. So it really goes down to, that's a lot of the work we do, is developing the right talking points, high-level talking points for each stakeholder in the account, because it turns out that the messaging may be slightly different depending on their role and where they see value. Again, remember, differentiated value is value that each stakeholder sees as satisfying their interests, and they all have slightly different interests within the account organization. So it's a really, really important point. I'll just give one example. There's one super high performing account manager selling a high-tech solution, and everybody wondered how she was so good. And it turned out she was very good in an urban environment at something else she loved, which was how to handle interior decoration and organization. And she would advise every account she went to of little things they could do in an urban environment to make the most out of their space. Nobody ever, really worried about switching solutions because they were happy with the solution, the technology solution. But what they really loved, it turned out, the differentiation was the little advice she gave them. And that's just an example of how we can deliver value in a lot of different ways for those relationships. Great question. I hope that's helpful. And love to go deeper. If you contact me, if you want to go deeper on any of that stuff, for sure.
John's absolutely right. Ease of use, locality, all these soft value drivers are a way to create value and separate yourself where some of the hard value drivers might not be. So we can go deeper in that another time. We are running against the hour. So thank you everyone for submitting your questions. And before we leave, just a brief, let me jump back a slide. Just a brief reminder, pre-register for our next webinar in the exit survey. So we've probably all spent the last year or two, I'm sure, wrapping our heads around around the impact of generative AI in our businesses and our lives. So next month, we're going to be exploring this a little bit. So we're going to be digging into what the massive developments in AI mean for the world of value communication and value selling. And we're also going to be giving a sneak preview at some exciting stuff we're working on here at Leverage Point to help B2B marketing and sales teams harness AI to accelerate profitability. So, this is going to be an exciting one. We'll have some stuff to show, so please sign up in the exit survey. And that's it from us today. So big thank you to John for sharing all your insights and making this a fun interactive session. And from those of us here at Leverage Point, we look forward to seeing you next month and at future webinars. So thank you very much and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Nick.